Good morning, Year 12. Welcome back to our Paper 2 Social Diversity. I would just like to say a quick thank you to those who've sent me your essays. They are already, I'm already very impressed by the quality of work I've been sent, so thank you very much. I really do appreciate your efforts. They will be marked and returned properly with some comments and feedback by the end of the week, okay? But thank you very much. So we are still under our topic umbrella of social diversity, but we are going to plan and complete a new exam task, okay? So we are still in section B of the exam paper, but we're looking today at a question 4. Now, just to kind of encourage you when you're doing these essays is that we are establishing a foundation, a framework for each of the different exam style tasks. So we started with a evaluative essay back together in class. You've just completed a second type, a different kind of essay structure, which is the analysis essay structure. And today we're looking at the third and final essay structure. Now, this is meant to be new. Okay, we're not meant to be perfect yet. Okay, we are cookie dough, which means we're just getting the ingredients together for each different exam task. And over time and practice, we will perfect and grow confident and more competent in these areas. So please understand that the standard at this stage is not perfection, is not A grade full marks. We are looking to establish the right foundation that we build on. Okay. So we're looking at section B today, question 4. So over here on our little diagram of the structure and tasks of the exam paper, we've done a section A task. That was where we evaluated social diversity or social issues. We've done the analysis now of 2 texts. And today and this week, we're going to begin to explore this task, question 4. And just as a little kind of summary, we're going to look at the task in full. You are directed in the question 4 to write a piece of journalism. So maybe to write an opinion article, a piece of journalism. Okay, now if we look at the mark scheme, there are 20 marks awarded in this task for your knowledge of theories and concepts. So the reason I like just using this image with you to start with, guys, if you look at section A, you've got 20 marks for theories and concepts. And in section B, question 4, 20 marks for theories and concepts. So the AO2 mark scheme is exactly the same for section A and section B, question 4. That means that once we build up the essay or into writing the article, we will be using our knowledge of theories and concepts. We will be going back and revising Bernstein, Laboff, Giles, because 20 marks in this task are derived from your knowledge of those theories and concepts, your knowledge and understanding of Giles, of Laboff, of Milroy. So we will be embedding some elements of revision, okay? So we return to those theories and concepts and we do a little bit of revision. However, and this is going to be our focus really for the first 2 lessons this week, we also have to recognize that we get a new AO here, AO5. Now, in section B, question 4, it's the only paper where there's an AO5, just like section B, question 3, it's the only paper with an AO4. So our AO5 is the awarding of 10 marks for the creative use of English to communicate. Okay? In other words, in a nutshell, although we are going to unpack it in more detail, when you're writing the opinion article, they're really challenging you to take all your theoretical knowledge or your academic knowledge of theories and concepts and to creatively use English to transform it and communicate it for a non-specialist audience. In other words, for a newspaper readership. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. So I'm just going to ask just in a minute that you zoom in down here on question 4 and that you just write down as the title for today or the title for the next bit series of works that we're going to be, look at number 4 here, writing a feature article about, I want you to leave blank for a minute, in which you assess the ideas and issues raised in text A and B and argue your own views. So I'm just going to ask you to pause, press pause and to use that as your title. And we're going to come back and discuss the 1, 2, 3, and 4 together in a minute. Okay, so this is the task then, write a feature article. Now, the only reason I've blanked it out is that this is actually the wording of a past paper on a different topic, women's language. So what is hiding under the purple is write a feature article about women's language. Now for us, because we're creating a paper that meets our social topic, it would be write a feature article about social accents, or about social attitudes, in which you assess the ideas and issues raised in text A and B and argue your own views for 30 marks. Remember, 20 of those marks are going to come through our theories and concepts, 10 is going to come through our ability to write like a journalist. So what we're really being asked to do for question 4, so section B, question 4, is 1, to adopt the style and form of an article. So we have to adopt a way of writing that is very different to the other two tasks. We could argue that both the evaluative and the analysis writing tasks, so question 3 was the analysis, section A is the evaluative, or what we would call academic. Okay, they are two academic styles of writing. Here, you're being asked to adopt the style and form of an article. In other words, here you're being asked to write like a journalist. So a journalist is a combination of information and entertainment. Yes, a journalist needs to inform a reader, but they need to do it in a way that is entertaining and holds their attention. So we're going to look across the next few lessons at how do we not only adopt the style and form of an article, but what does that even mean? So we're going to start to think like, how do journalists write? Okay, it's also asking you to adopt your own perspective and point of view. So it's clearly using all the way through there, you and your. It's asking you to have your own perspective, your own point of view, your own response. Okay, so although we do use the knowledge and theories, okay, of Bernstein, of Laboff, of Giles, of Milroy, you get to decide in this article what your perspective is, what your point of view is. Are you in agreement or disagreement with those theories? So they are looking for what we call your own authorial voice, your own authorial perspective and point of view. So that's what we're going to learn. However, that is balanced with you adapting stuff. Okay, so adopting means taking on something new. Adapting means changing what we've got already. So for point 3 within this kind of response, we are looking to adapt the knowledge of theories, concepts, and ideas relating to the topic, but for a non-specialist audience. So we need to take everything we know about Bernstein, Milroy, Laboff, Giles, and then the challenge is, how do I talk about Bernstein, Laboff, Milroy, Giles in a way that a non-specialist audience would understand? In other words, if you were talking to your nan or mum or dad or somebody that does psychology with you but not language, how would you talk to them about Bernstein in a way that they would understand and in a way that would entertain and interest them? Because, okay, they might understand what you're saying, but they might be bored. So the challenge for us then is the adaptation of what we know for a non-specialist audience. Okay, and this is number 4. It comes last because this is only what really happens on the day. Okay, 1 to 3 we can do in advance. We can plan for that. But on the day, you would have read and responded to 2 texts you've never seen before. They're the question 3 texts, because they do ask you to adapt what you think in response to the ideas and issues raised in those question 3 texts. So there are 4 strands of thinking and practice that we are going to address over the next few lessons. Okay, and then as we move forward in the course within each topic area, we come back to a past paper, and again we practice this over and over. So we're going to focus on those skills. Now, although we've looked at past paper examples before, I've not actually begun this way. Okay, we've looked at me explaining, offering essay plans, etc. But I would like to just show you the creative mark scheme. Okay, so it says up here, how can the mark scheme help me to adopt the style and form of an article? Now, the reason I want to start with the mark scheme is this will be maybe like Marmite to you. You'll either love it or hate it. You'll either love the opportunity to be creative and write like a journalist, or you'll hate it. Or you'll think you'll hate it, or you'll think you'll love it. You'll say things like, I'm not creative. I can't come up with a headline. I don't know the creative stuff. Miss, I can learn the theory. I can learn everything about Milroy, but I've got no idea how to be creative. Now, the mark scheme that I want to show you is actually a way that we can train ourselves to be creative. That's the other thing people have, is this is fallacy. You either are creative or you're not. You either think creatively or you don't. The mark scheme that we use teaches you to be creative. And actually, there's points on this mark scheme that we can practice in advance and learn in advance of any exam. So it takes the pressure off having to be creative under time conditions. Okay, so we're going to use the mark scheme, as I said, just to kind of illustrate some of those benefits of thinking like a journalist. Okay, so at the lowest level, I mean, there is a level 1, but we don't even look there. Okay, it says that students will use the form appropriately, use appropriate language for context, make occasional errors. They are likely to use article format, e.g. a headline, a functional headline, sub-editorial material, a linguistic register, but be overly academic, and address the audience, but be overly informal. So this is our red criteria. In other words, this is the minimal we ever expect. Okay, and we learn really quickly when we look at how we move up through the levels that actually to stay here is just making a bad choice, because there's real quick tweaks to each of these aspects of the level 2 that makes it a level 3 and 4. Okay, but we absolutely learn right from the start how to write headlines and bylines. We also learn how to self-evaluate our own work to look for inconsistencies, because a level 2 student is inconsistent. In other words, they might start writing like a journalist, but then they slip out of that mode. They stop writing like a journalist and they begin writing like an evaluative essay. So they slip into section A, evaluative essay writing, or they are always too informal. They write too informally the whole way through. So really, the marker of a level 2 student is inconsistency. But we're not going to do that. No, we don't want to be level 2. We're going to be better. So we can then see from the level 3, we're going to keep the headline and the byline, but we're also going to plan to use a stand first. So every time we do a question form, the automatic starting point for us is headline, stand first, byline. Okay, now we're going to practice that today and this week, and that's going to mean we're hitting that level 3 criteria of producing an effective opening and what they call lively sub-editorial material. Okay, we are going to always present knowledge of theories and concepts in an accessible way. So part of our practice over the next few lessons is how do I transform my knowledge of theory, so my information on Bernstein, in an accessible way. And we're going to practice balance. So we're going to move from being inconsistent to being balanced writers. And what are we going to balance? Information and entertainment. Okay, and that's going to be our safety net. Really, we're not even going to spend any time really thinking about level 2. From a self-evaluative point of view, we will learn to look for inconsistencies, but every time we plan and write an article, we're going to be coming in here. We're going to plan headline, stand first, byline. We're going to plan to choose 2 theorists, 2 to 3 theorists, and then we're going to transform them. But we don't even really want to stay there. That's our safe, absolute, like bottom expectation, is that level 3 criteria, because we're going to work at level 4. We're going to keep using headlines, stand first, and bylines, but actually we're always going to make sure that we create a cyclical link between the headline, stand first, and the byline and our conclusion. So that means that for a level 4, we're going to produce effective openings and conclusions, because we're going to plan that intentionally with every response we do for a question 4. We're going to plan, this is my headline, my stand first, my byline, and this is how I'm going to create the cyclical link. And all of this we're going to practice this week and over the coming lessons. So I'm just signposting what we're doing. We're always going to present and challenge in an article up to at least theories, concepts, and ideas, at least 3. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to put in some safeguards, some boundaries for each expectation at each stage, so that we're also maintaining a consistent journalistic style. So we don't end up being inconsistent or too informal, or falling into the trap of writing like an evaluative essay. Now, once we're secure and happy in those areas, we naturally begin to operate or can potentially reach for the highest possible grades. So it says here for a level 5 that students use a range of cohesion strategies. So as we begin to look at writing like journalists, I'm going to introduce you today to something called a peg. And this week, how we use pegs within and across each paragraph. So that would hit the criteria of a range of cohesion strategies. Okay, we're going to create an explicit link between the key ideas and concepts of text A and B and the world of the reader. That's going to enable us to hit the level 5 bullet point to transform and explore ideas relevantly and interestingly. And it says for level 5, close control of sentence effects. So we're going to learn to use a variety of sentence effects with control. Now, guys, the truth about this mark scheme is when I'm guiding you and teaching you in class, I can make explicit signposts to make sure you hit the level 5 criteria in the level 4. The real challenge becomes that you internalize that over time, not in this first essay we're going to do, this first article, but over time, the more we practice, how are you internalizing the SMART scheme? What are you remembering to do without me? Now, that is the bigger journey for our 2-year course, is that eventually you remember to do the different elements of each mark scheme without me. But this is us starting, this is us working together to get an example done. So I'm going to make signposts, real clear signposts, that this is what we do for the level 5, this is what we do for the level 4. Okay, so we're going to be using the mark scheme. Now, the other thing we're going to use is this extract. Now, interestingly, this extract was released by the exam board. So our little question for this page is, how can the examiner advise help me to adopt the style and form of an article? In other words, what can the examiner help me do to get me thinking and writing like a journalist? Now, they released this extract as part of an examiner's pack. How could we as teachers support students in thinking and writing like journalists? So actually this extract wasn't ever written for an exam board. This was written, it says here, accidents will happen, Oliver Cam, The Onion Publishing House Group, London, by this gentleman called Oliver Cam, who is a real journalist who works for a newspaper. And it's his response to some of the articles they were being sent in. So he calls himself a pundit. In other words, it's his job to look through the articles being sent into his newspaper and decide, are they worthy of publication? Now, we've got the information on one side of the page, and over here we've got a checklist, okay, to check that as you're reading this, you can extract the key information. So once I've read this to you, I'm going to ask you to pause. I'm going to ask you to complete this, and this will be almost like a checklist in your own notes, your own book, of what you want to be bearing in mind when we start thinking and writing like journalists, okay? So our pundit says, I'm a pundit. Every day the comment desk of a newspaper receives unsolicited articles for publication. Lots of them. Vanishingly few are of publishable quality, however great the knowledge of the aspiring contributor. The principal reason is that they just don't read fluently. They're verbose, and not only in being typically far longer than any newspaper could publish, they lack structure and argument, being mainly a series of assertions and unrelated digressions. And the most besetting problem is that they are dull. So in that first paragraph, we'll find the information we need to copy and complete the first couple of statements. So he's saying that good journalists create something beginning with F. Okay, now he says the principal reason that none of these publications get published is that they just don't read, what's our F word? Fluently. Brilliant. So your statement's going to become create fluency. Now that does actually link to the mark scheme, this idea of we want to avoid inconsistency, we want to be fluent and consistent. So in a minute, when you pause the screen, you're going to copy and complete these red statements, and the first one is create fluency. Okay, what else do they want us to avoid being? What's the V they want us to avoid being? Oh, they want us to avoid being verbose. Now, verbose means talking too much, writing too much. Okay, and not only in being typically far longer than any newspaper could publish. So we want to avoid talking too much. Okay, and in other words, they avoid being verbose and avoid too long and being too long. Okay, so we want to avoid being verbose and too long, which is a challenge because teachers are always, particularly when we start doing exam responses, one of the biggest feedbacks often is you need to be consistent, you need to sustain it, you need to write more. So we will look at what the right length should be, okay? And we will set a standard for the length of an article and then how we work to that, okay? So they lack structure and argument, being mainly a series of assertions and unrelated digressions. And the most besetting problem is that they are dull. So we want to plan to what? Structure and build an argument. Okay, we want to plan to structure and build an argument, relating each idea to the next. So he's saying not only are they too long, but they don't connect. There's inconsistencies. So one of the things we're going to take from this pundit is that we are going to plan to structure and build an argument relating each idea to the next. It also says then, as it reads on, it's as if the writer, aware of the responsibility of addressing the public, can't talk naturally. Okay, naturally, but adopts a tone of affected gravity. In other words, he's saying lots of the articles that they reject takes themselves too seriously. Gravity means serious. And what he's saying makes for good journalism. The inference here is journalists who talk, in brackets, write naturally. Okay, now when we talk about that, it's the right balance between information and entertainment. We saw that on the mark scheme. We want the balance between information and argument. Okay, so we want to plan, to structure and build an argument relating each idea to next. We want to write naturally. Now that means we're going to allow for some colloquialisms and voice. And that again is where we'll see differences in the different articles you create. We want all of you to develop your unique authorial voice, your unique journalistic voice. Okay, brilliant. You can tell from the first paragraph and sometimes from the first sentence, I'm less hostile to the cliche, it goes without saying, than the sticklers who typically deride it. If it goes without saying, why say it? It's an idiom. But it's a terrible way to start the argument of a case. And if you make it through to the end, you'll generally find an equally feeble conclusion along the lines of, will X happen or Y? Only time will tell. There's no peg for the article, a piece of news or an insight that would allow the reader to quickly catch the flow of the argument. There's no arresting metaphor or perception. It's like reading the transcript of an accountant's convention. Okay, so we want to avoid something in idioms, cliches. We want to avoid cliches and idioms. We want to include a, so he introduces a word that I will keep using. I've already used it already. The word beginning with P, which stands for a piece of news or insight. Yeah, we're going to learn about pegs, what a peg is and how we use them. And he also challenges a good journalist to use arresting metaphor, brilliant, or perception. So we're going to plan across the lessons, lots of practice that we do from now on, thinking about metaphors. Now, perception means a way of seeing the situation. Okay, perception is how I see something. So he wants us to be unique. Now, that's the counterbalance to cliches and idioms, looking for arresting metaphors and perceptions. Okay, this isn't how people naturally talk. It's merely how they think they ought to write for a serious audience. The condition carries over to public speaking. People who are unused to have given a speech often write it out beforehand, peppering it with phrases that they believe convey seriousness, but are merely dull and hackneyed. So, guys, this is the, if you like, our checklist based on the examiner's advice. So we want to create a fluency, avoid being verbose and too long, plan to structure and build an argument relating each idea to next. We want to write naturally, allowing for colloquialisms and voice. We want to avoid cliches and idioms. We want to include a peg, brilliant, and we want to use arresting metaphors. So guys, I'm just going to ask you to pause and write that as a checklist, okay? Now you can call it the examiner's checklist, you can call it my checklist, and these are areas that I'm going to teach into over the next few lessons that you are going to build into, and they're going to be ways that every time you write an article, this will be part of our framework. Right, guys, how are we going to create fluency? How are we going to avoid these? And at different points, I will give you, again, like I said, direct teaching into them. So just press pause there and make sure you get that copied and completed. Okay, so we're going to start actually thinking today then along these first few lines. So we're going to think like journalists today and tomorrow. We know that there's aspects of the mark scheme. They're worth more marks to you, 20 marks, knowledge and concepts, but that's actually going to be revisiting work we've already done on Bernstein Laboff, so I will start to feed that in. But I want to start with something new. It's a bit like a wedding, something old, something new today. Okay, and how do we think like journalists? So I've said that every article we write will hit and plan for these key areas. Headline, stand first and byline, and I'm also going to talk to you about planning to address ideas and issues from the articles. So headlines stand first and bylines. So what do we mean by that? Well, we've seen already, and this is the relationship between question 3 and question 4, two articles that we've analysed. Both of them have evidence of different types of headlines. Okay, and from the analysis section, we can recap really quickly on this. So the BBC Work Life headline, does your accent make you sound smarter? Okay, it's an interrogative. It's got the determiner your to make a direct synthetic personalization, a direct link to the reader. It's using the noun accent to introduce the clear topic focus. And it's using the structure of the sentence itself to establish the relationship, isn't it, between accent and intelligence. But the key things here is we've got an interrogative headline. Okay, now we've got this shut your face. I'm fed up being ridiculed for my regional accent headline. It is longer. It's a combination of two sentence functions. We've got the exclamatory and we've got the declarative. Okay, shut your face. We've seen creativity in this headline. The creativity comes through the choice to use the phonetic yeah. So they're not misspelling it because they don't know how to spell. It's a deliberate phonetic creative choice. Shut your face. Okay, so it's already writing in that natural, think what our pundit said, they like journalists that write naturally. In that naturalistic voice, I'm fed up being ridiculed for my regional accent in academia. And again, immediately signposting in this headline the topic, the issue. So the topic in both of them is really clear. It's linked to accents. Okay, one is creating the interrogative, so it's setting up the question, the relationship between accent and intelligent. The other one is making a very clear, personal kind of anecdotal, I'm fed up. Okay, so what we begin to do over time is we build on our understanding of headlines through the examples we encounter. So as we go through, I'm just going to talk you through what headlines can be. Okay, and you're going to make your own list. So notes moving forward. So headlines, every article you ever write is going to have a headline. Now, the safe way is a functional headline. Yep, there used to be a lovely advert called Seal does exactly what it says on the tin. So a functional headline does exactly what it says on the tin. Okay, it makes it really clear what the article is going to be about. Does your accent make you sound smarter? Is a functional headline. It's also an interrogative. So we know that headlines actually can be any sentence function. And as we've already seen, they can sometimes be a combination. So actually, a lot of articles that we encounter, we begin to look at the headlines and think, right, what is it doing? Is it a combination of functions from an analytical point of view for question 3? But actually for question 4, we think, can I steal it? Can I magpie it? Can I nick what they've done as a headline? So functional headlines, the clear use of the interrogative. Does your accent make you sound smarter? Does your accent make you sound posh? Does your accent go against you? Does your accent hold you back? So we begin to see that when we think creatively and we're planning our own headlines for an article, that we can take an existing functional headline, does your accent make you sound smarter, and begin just to rewrite it as our own. Now, the second headline is what we call the creative option. Now, the creative versus functional, both tick, tick, meet our level 3, that criteria for having a clear headline. Okay, the creative headline was not because she was simply using the exclamatory and the declarative together, but it was actually this use of your, shut your face. That's why it was a creative headline, because she was deliberately being playful. She was trying to create an entertaining yet informative headline. She was being playful. She was creating balance. Shut your face. Okay, so functional headlines are functional. They do the job. They have a clear topic, accents, and they have a clear hook, dilemma. Okay, so a functional headline is clear to see what the topic's about. Oh, this is an article about accents, and what the tension is. Oh, does it make me sound smarter? So a functional headline, if you want to write this down, a functional headline is both clear and signpost tension. A creative headline is signposting the tension and the topic, but it does it in a creative way. So headlines, okay, overall, it's because I'm asking you to listen and write this down. So headlines signpost the topic and the tension. So what is the focus? Accent. What's the tension? Is it making you sound smarter? I'm being ridiculed, so tension. But they can do it in a functional way. So like short, efficient, to the point, or they can be creative. They can be playful. They can be interrogatives, exclamatories, declaratives, or imperatives. And sometimes headlines don't have to be a single sentence, as we've seen in the second one. They can be a combination of functions. Brilliant. So just make a note of that for me. So press pause and write down those keywords with your own notes, just explaining what I've said. So headlines introduce the topic and the tension. They can do it in a functional way, which means clear and efficient, or they can do it in a creative way using playful language, creative uses of language. Okay, they can be interrogatives, exclamatories, declaratives, or imperatives, or a combination of functions. Okay, so in your notes, I want to see that you've written down those keywords with, based on what you've heard, the explanation of what they mean. Okay, so again, we're going back to the two texts that we've seen. So here we've got our stand first. Now, both of these actually combine stand first and bylines. There are some examples of articles that we'll encounter where they do separate the two out. So a combination of a stand first and a byline. Now, quick disclosure, byline is the name of the writer at its most simple level. The byline is the name of the writer. So Chi Lu, Dr. Katie Edwards. However, what we see with Dr. Katie Edwards is the byline being foregrounded by this expanded noun phrase, university lecturer. So if you remember when we analysed this in class, it was very particular to Katie Edwards. It's about creating her credibility as an academic, as somebody whose opinion we can trust. But the byline is the name of the writer at its most basic level. It can be combined with an expanded noun phrase, or what we call the information that gives us their credentials, and it foregrounds us to think certain things about the writer. Here we've just got writes Chi Lu, and actually we get more information about this writer at the end of the article, but it's the BBC Workforce, so it's slightly different, but we've just got the writer's name. So bylines, name of the writer. It can be, I'll remind you of this in a minute, expanded or developed, and as you can see here, sometimes it can be embedded within the stand first. Okay, so look at our stand first. Some of us will speak with a posher voice if we think it will make the right impression, but is it worth it? So this stand first is mirroring the interrogative of the headline. So it's still setting up the tension of this topic. There is tension, there is conflict between the idea of how we speak and how it makes us appear. And the conflict is it the right thing to do? Is it right to change our voice to change how we speak to make a right impression, to get ahead, to sound smarter? So a stand first is an anchor point. It creates the bridge between the headline and the rest of the article. It is sometimes a single sentence, but it stands apart. It can be bold, it can be bigger than the font, the choices that we see in the main article. Some of us will speak with a posher voice if we think it will make the right impression, but is it worth it? Okay, so stand first. I'll explain and we'll write this down in a minute though, but just to show these as examples, creates the bridge between the headline and the rest of the article. We see cohesion being created by the repetition of ideas from the headline with some change, some changing it up. So some of us will speak with a posher voice if we think it will make the right impression, but is it worth it? Oh, and that links back to, does your accent make you sound smarter? Okay, so posher and smarter are synonyms, the positive representation of people if they speak a particular way. Okay, now we've got the embedded byline. University lecturer Dr. Katie Edwards has faced prejudice for her regional Mexborough accent, so much so that she's conducted research into it. Here, she explains why the problem is so much worse in academic circles. Now, this is an interesting stand first because it's the only moment in the article that is not first person. Okay, the headline is first person, shut your face, I'm fed up. So this headline gives us Katie Edwards' voice. The rest of the article, once we start, begins in the first person. So this stand first, so both these stand first, a standalone bridges sentences, paragraphs that bridge between the headline and the rest of the article. And the Telegraph have chosen to take ownership of this stand first because it's not in the first person. And they're actually using it to create a bridge between the headline and the article by introducing us to Dr. Katie Edwards from their perspective. Okay, so they tell us who she is, a university lecturer. They tell her what's happened to her, that she's faced prejudice. and they tell us that she's conducted research. So this anonymous they is really the voice, the perspective of the Telegraph. They're saying, this is the opinion you're about to get. So they tell us she's a university lecturer. They use the choice of noun prejudice to show that they're on her side, that she has been discriminated against, and that she's conducting research. Now, interestingly, here she explains why the problem is so much worse in academic circles. So that sentence at the end of the stand first is getting us ready to transition into the main article, which is going to be an explanation of the problem. So it's creating that link. So guys, for us, okay, the stand first and the byline. So we're just going to write this down in our notes. So the stand first anchors and expands the headline. So there should be a clear link when we write our stand first to the headline. Okay, now that clear link can be used through the repetition of words, direct repetition. It can be linked by expanding, telling us more about a key idea, and through definition and amplification of a word or idea in the headline. A stand first creates the bridge between the headline and the main article. It can use the repetition of keywords and or synonyms, and in some way it will define, explain and focus us on a key idea from the headline. It's a stand first though, in that it anchors and expands and it creates a bridge, but it stands alone. It is a single paragraph that will look different to the rest of the article. And the byline, so like lower level, we always just remember to include our name. So Amy Deutsch. Now, if we were using the name in the expansion with a little bit of credentials and foregrounding, we get to think creatively in journalism. So we're not going to say that our name and credentials are that we're A-level students. We fake it a little bit. So we might say language expert and enthusiast Amy Deutsch. So I've given myself some fake credentials, but I sound pretty cool. We could say university lecturer Amy Deutsch. Okay, so we get the byline is simply the name of the journalist. We get the expansion option where we might use within a declarative sentence some credentials, some foregrounding. And we can sometimes get the name plus the embedded stand first as part, embedded in a sentence as part of the stand first. So either three of those elements is us hitting the criteria of journalism for a byline, for a stand first, and a headline. And these are the bits that we get trained in. These are also the bits, once we cover all the topic areas, that actually you can create a what we call an umbrella headline, an umbrella stand first, an umbrella byline. So whatever comes up in the exam, as long as you can have a headline, stand first, and byline pre-learned, pre-secure. Okay, so I'm just going to ask you to pause and write that down. Okay, guys, and our last bit for today is just as well headline, stand first, byline. That's the A05, the new mark scheme. But you can't really think a headline, stand first, and byline without being aware that that's why it's in this blue for the higher marks. We could immediately be creating headline, stand first, and bylines that also enable us to address ideas and issues from text A and B, which is another part of the mark scheme. So what we're going to just do is very quickly, I just want you to think with me and copy and complete these statements, okay? So we've analyze these texts. Now that's the relationship between question 3 and 4, that because we've analyzed the text, we've got this information in the exam scenario in the forefront of our minds. We've just analyzed these two texts. We know what the issues are. So if we look again at text A and B together, does your accent make you sound smarter? Shut your face, I'm fed up being ridiculed for my regional accent. How would you summarize these key ideas and issues from text A and B? So number 1, both text A and B are questioning relationships between. So what could we put in there? What ideas? So we've got the information to our left, the two headlines. We've analysed these texts. Okay, so text A and B are both questioning the relationship between accents and impressions, accents and intelligence. They're questioning the relationship between the way we speak and how people perceive us. So what you just need to do for that one is just to write down that it's questioning the relationship between maybe accents and perception, accents and the way people see us. Now, people with regional accents are being, and this is. So what else are the ideas and issues from text A and B? How can we bring them together? So what's happening to some people with regional accents? How are they being treated? There's a clue here on the page. Okay, so we could say people with regional accents are being ridiculed, are being mistreated, are being unfairly represented. And this is that wrong or right? This is creating anger, this is creating prejudice, this is creating hostility, and this is wrong. So you're just going to pause. Now, this is the important bit. This is what I'm going to give you time to do. Do you agree or disagree? So in a minute, for both 1 and 2, you're going to copy and complete the statement. So these articles are questioning the relationships between accents and impression, accents and people. People with regional accents are being discriminated against, and this is wrong. People with regional accents are being ridiculed, and this is creating hostility. So the last little bit, agree or disagree, is, do you think it's right or wrong that people are being ridiculed, that people are being mistreated? That's what it means to look at the ideas and the issues from text A and then bring in your own perspective. So this is just as planning, quickly getting some ideas today. So you're going to copy and complete the statements 1 and 2, and then you're just going to write your own statement at this stage. So it's just a summary statement. I disagree with this position. I think you should change the way you speak to get a job. I agree with these issues and with these ideas. It is wrong to be biased against people. So you're just going to write down, copy and complete those statements and write down agree or disagree. Okay, and then we've got one last one to do, and then that's us done for today. Okay, so you've hopefully written down your agree or disagree. So we're just going to use the stand first again. So let's have a look. How can we summarize the ideas and issues from text A and B? So some of us will speak with a posher voice if we think it will make the right impression, but is it worth it? So we could say people are adapting the, okay, good, the way they speak in order to sound posher, in order to make the right impression, in order to be accepted, in order to fit in order to be valued. So there is variety, and it doesn't mean that you simply have to use the words of these two, but we're starting to put the ideas and issues into our own words. So standard accents in RP are believed to be, so based on this, if it's going to make the right impression to be posher, it's the idea then that standard accents in RP are believed to be the beneficial or the preferential way to speak, I believe to be better. Okay, now if we look at Katie Edwards' stand first again, face prejudice, so much so that she's conducted research into it. It's a problem. So we could say people have experienced prejudice, people have experienced discrimination because of the way they speak, because of their regional accents, because of their non-standard accents, particularly in, so where is the problem worse? Academic circles, so particularly in universities, particularly in academic circles. Now, once you've got those summaries, again, it's a moment for you to think, well, do you agree that it is wrong to judge people based on the way they speak? Do you agree, or do you think that these guys are overreacting? Do you think that there are worse things that people are being discriminated for? So just have a moment to copy and complete those statements and to decide whether you agree or not. Okay, and so the final stage for us. Now, the reason I'm doing this live, not like the others, is headlines stand first and bylines. Those elements do not change. Those elements, exactly as they are on the page today, will be on the page in 3 weeks, 3 months, next year, when we're revising in class, beautifully back together, how to write articles. That element of information does not change. This is the element, the ideas, issues to be addressed. This is the A grade, B into A grade element that has to be thought about right from the start. But at the same time, it's always going to be different, because this is the bit that's done in response to the 2 texts you analyze on the day. So where it says then the ideas to be addressed and issued. Now, the first thing is then, so we're going to be reflecting on the idea that, so this is just, again, thinking about some of the statements you've just completed. So we might say, some people are angry that discrimination exists relating to speech and accent, because that's really a summary of the issue and the ideas of Katie Edwards. Now, number 2, so we could talk about there is a link between how we speak and how we are seen and treated. Because that's, again, that summary, that some people are being more successful, some people are getting ahead. So 3. Okay, so we can get the ideas and issues in our forethinking. So we're planning headlines, stand first, bylines, and we're going to plan to potentially integrate some of these ideas and issues into our headlines, stand first, and bylines. So some people are angry that discrimination exists relating to speech and accent. There is a link between how we speak and how we are treated. Prejudice exists towards certain accents and social groups. Now, I've said you can make up to 3 to 4. Now, what we've got here is I've intentionally planned through this sheet to make sure that whatever I do moving forward, I'm going to be thinking about my headline, stand first, byline, and at some point I'm going to be addressing up to 5 issues. Now, I've just stopped at 3 because we can build in more issues if we were looking across the article. We could talk about, okay, so just 2 other things we might remember. Can you remember which groups were being told to change their accents? So we could say teachers are being advised to change how they speak. So although I was initially using the stand first and the headlines to do these issues, really the reason we go up to 5 is that we have 5 ideas or issues from across all of the 2 articles that we've analysed. Teachers are being advised how they change how they speak. Speech, there is minorities. I remember it used minorities are being. So what was happening to those minorities? They were being singled out. Now, all of these are the ideas and issues. Now, your 5 that you can develop can be exactly off my sheet. You could write 5 of your own. But what we've got here then, this is my AO5 mark scheme in a plan. Okay, I'm going to plan my headline, my stand first, my byline, and I'm going to plan across my article to address these issues. Now, the other thing that I would quickly do, now this is again unique to every text, okay, is that we just finally make a reference to the 2 writers. Now, really, that comes into play when we start thinking about writing our opening paragraph, which really for us is going to be next lesson, maybe even the lesson after, depending on how we get through. But what I want you to have in your mind today is that this is us starting to think like journalists, okay? We have not now got a worked document that reminds us that when we think like journalists, that we're going to create headlines, stand first, and bylines. And very particular to this piece of journalism we're working on, we're going to be addressing up to these 5 issues. Okay, my lovelies? So that's what I want you just to make sure that you've got in your notes to show that you've been successful this lesson. And I will see you tomorrow.